Jesus had all sorts of interesting interactions with different people while he was on this earth, and they're recorded for us, many of them, in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And in Mark chapter 10, we have this interaction between Jesus and the person we usually call the rich young ruler. And you don't have to turn there. This is going to be an introduction to our lesson this morning. But this young man, this person who seemed to have it all together, he comes up to Jesus, and he asks Jesus a question. He says, "Good teacher, what good thing shall I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus goes, "Why are you calling me good? There is no one good except God alone." He goes, "You know the commandments. Do not commit murder. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Do not defraud. Honor your father and mother." And the man tells Jesus, he goes, "Teacher, I've kept all of these things from my youth. I've always done what God has said." And then Jesus tells him something, and he goes, "Okay." He goes, "One thing you are lacking is this." He says, "Go, sell all of your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Come and follow me." And the man goes away grieving because he has many possessions. And the disciples are kind of shocked at this. And then Jesus, right after this interaction, tells his disciples, he goes, how hard it is for a rich man to get into heaven. And he gives this illustration. He says, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get to heaven. And the disciples are like freaked out by this. And they go, in verse 26, "Then who can be saved?" Powerful question. Because here's a man who came to Jesus who seemed to have it all figured out. A man who was doing everything right. But you know what? There's always one command more to follow. There's always one more thing you could do to obey. No one is ever perfect in their obedience. And even rich people that seem to have it all together, Jesus goes, no, it's hard for them to get to heaven too. And the disciples are like, well, how can anybody be saved? And Jesus says, with people, it is impossible, but not with God. For all things are possible with God. And I think in context, the whole point is it's impossible for us to be perfect on our own. We need Jesus. The problem is this guy thought he was good, and Jesus is the one who is good. God is the one who is good. And yes, it is impossible for us on our own to make it into heaven. We need Jesus Christ. But that phrase, with God all things are possible, is a powerful phrase. And this morning, I want us to keep that phrase in the back of our mind as we think about this idea of, instead of saying, I can't, because that's what happens with this guy. He says, I'm keeping all these commandments, and Jesus goes, all right, well, here's one more for you to keep. Sell everything. I can't do that. I can't do that. There's no way I could do that. Instead of saying, I can't, say, God can, because the impossible can become possible if we approach it the right way. And what I want to show you this morning in this lesson, I'm going to prove it to you here in a moment, but what we're going to see is this. The impossible can become possible if we do these three things. Ignore the opposition. Number 2, overcome fear. And number 3, always give God the glory. You might be thinking, well, how's that possible, Cliff? Right? How can the impossible become possible? I'm going to prove it to you this morning from the book of Nehemiah that we've been studying, specifically Nehemiah chapter 6 and verse 15, where it says, so the wall was completed. Now, if you're new here, what we've been doing, on Sunday mornings, we've been looking through the book of Nehemiah. And it's an Old Testament book. It's a book that sometimes we neglect. And today we're going to be in Nehemiah chapter 6. And the whole book of Nehemiah is about how the Israelites, they have been in captivity in Babylon and what later became the Persian Empire. And Nehemiah petitions King Artaxerxes to let him go back and rebuild the wall around the city of Jerusalem. Because Jerusalem was that holy city. Jerusalem was the place of worship. Jerusalem was the identity of that people. And the wall around it was the protection from the outside world that allowed them to reinstitute the law and all of that. But the wall's in disrepair. Nehemiah is upset about this. The wall is representative of the state of the people, their spiritual health. So Nehemiah asks the king to let him go back and rebuild that wall. And the king lets him. And Nehemiah takes people, and they go back there, and they work on that wall. And what we find out is that Nehemiah and the crew have been working very quickly. And they've had a lot of opposition along the way. It has not been an easy task. In fact, they had to have guards behind the workers to make sure people didn't assault them. Some of the workers had a weapon in one hand and a tool in the other as they're working to rebuild this wall. Problems arise with every brick, but Nehemiah continues to overcome these problems with the glory of God. Let's read Nehemiah chapter 6 and verse 1. Now when it was reported to Sanballat, Tobiah, and to Geshem the Arab, and to the rest of our enemies that I had rebuilt the wall, and that no breach remained in it, although at that time I had not set up doors in the gates. And by the way, are Sanballat, Tobiah, and these guys good guys or bad guys? They're bad guys, right? These are bad guys. They're always trying to cause problems with the Israelites. And they hear about the fact that the wall is being built. So they rally their gang there to try to get after him. Verse 2, then Sanballat and Geshem sent a message to me saying, come, let us meet together at Sephraim in the plain of Ono, which, by the way, if anybody ever tells you to go to the plain of Ono, Ono is the right response, right? He says, but they were planning to harm me. So these guys who are trying to oppose Nehemiah along the way, they hear that the wall is rebuilt. The doors aren't up yet, but the wall is pretty much finished. So they send a message to Nehemiah, the leader. They go, hey, Nehemiah, come over here and let's meet together. No, Nehemiah's not dumb. These guys have, along the way, they've been trying to harm them, they've mocked them, they've persecuted them, and now they want to talk. God wants us to be smart, right? Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves, okay? If there's someone that's been trying to kill you all along, goes, hey, let's go down to a dark alley and talk privately. You don't do it, okay? You got to be smart. Nehemiah's smart, and he knows that they were planning to harm him. So what does he do? In verse 3, look how he handles this situation. He tells them, I'm doing a good work, and I cannot come down. Why should I leave the work and let the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? See, there's some people that are opposing Nehemiah's work. They thought, there's no way they're going to rebuild the wall. There's no way they're going to rebuild the wall. Lo and behold, the wall is about to be rebuilt, and Sanballat and his gang of thugs here are like, oh no, come and meet with us. Nehemiah goes, I can't. I'm busy. I cannot come down. I'm doing a great work. Basically, I can't be bothered by you. See, we need to think like this too. When we're busy doing the Lord's work and there's people that want to bog us down in all sorts of different conflicts. Conflicts over politics, conflicts over everything else, arguments, drama. Tune it all out and go, you know what? I can't be bothered with that right now. I'm doing a great work and I can't stop doing it. The Lord has work for me to do, so we ignore the opposition. Let's keep reading. Verse 4, they sent messengers to me 4 times. They don't relent. They're like 4 times in the same manner, and I answered them the same way. He goes, look, every time they sent me a message, I said, nope, I don't have time for you. There's people that will send me things in my inbox and stuff. Hey, check this out, or did you know this? I'm like, I don't got time for that drama. And you know what? There's a beautiful button on your computer. Delete. And by the way, for those of you on social media, you can also unfollow people. You can block them. You can go, I don't need that. I'm doing the Lord's work. I don't have time for that. He does that. Then Sanballat sent his servant to me the same manner a 5th time with an open letter in his hand. And it was written, it is reported among the nations. And Geshem says that you and the Jews are planning to rebel. And therefore you're rebuilding the wall. And you're going to be their king according to these reports. And on and on. Basically, they're creating this conspiracy theory. The guys that are opposed to Nehemiah are like, look, we know what you're doing. You're actually setting up a kingdom. And you're going to try to be a king. And we're going to tell all the other kings that they need to stop you. Right? The opposition doesn't like it. They're doing a good work. So they start spreading rumors and saying, we're going to tell everybody what you're doing. And they're going to spread lies about him. But Nehemiah, verse 9, responds this way. It says, for all of them were trying to frighten us, thinking they will become discouraged with the work, and it will not be done. But look what Nehemiah says. But now, O God, strengthen my hands. When you're doing the Lord's work, there might be people who spread rumors about you. There might be people who say false things about you. There might be people who threaten you. There might be people that say, no, you can't do it. There's no way. There's no way you're going to change. There's no way you're going to overcome that sin. There's no way it's going to work out. There's no way that God can love you, right? They're going to spread all sorts of things. But you have to go, I'm not going to be discouraged because God is going to strengthen my hands. They overcame fear. Let's keep reading. He goes on. He enters in the house. They meet together. They talk. He says, we're not going to give up. We're not going to quit. And then verse 15, it says, so the wall was completed on the 25th day of the month of Elul in 52 days. Wow. Look how fast they were working. When all of our enemies heard of it and all the nations surrounding us saw it, they lost their confidence, for they recognized that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. Everybody saw what had happened. They saw how the people were giving God the glory. The outsiders saw that the work was done that quick. They go, you know what? There's no way that this happened by just human means. God must be helping these people out. They saw what had been accomplished with the help of their God. So is there a lesson there for us? Because this isn't, this is just a lesson about construction. The Bible's just telling us this to talk about, the process by which they built this wall. This isn't here to just be a lesson on wall construction, temple rebuilding, and all that as Ezra goes along and so on. This book is designed to teach us something, I think, about God, about the human condition, about leadership, about trust, and about how God can do things that most people think is impossible. Because immediately when Nehemiah, let's go back to the beginning. Nehemiah had a job of being the royal food server, basically, to the king. And he hears about the wall, and he decides to go and ask the king to give him not only the permission to leave, but also supplies and safety to go rebuild that wall. If someone came up to you and go, all right, I know I'm basically a slave, but I'm going to go ask the king to give me money and power and opportunity to go rebuild the city of the captive nation that he now has power over. You'd be like, what are you talking about? That's impossible. There's no way that's going to happen. What happened? The impossible became possible, and Nehemiah got that permission. Well, there's no way that Nehemiah is going to be able to get all those supplies. The impossible became possible. There's no way that people are going to be able to go there and rebuild that wall. There's going to be so much opposition that they're going to be killed, they're going to be beat, that's going to be stopped. The impossible became possible. There's no way that people are going to become discouraged, they're going to quit, they're going to give up, they're going to go home. The impossible became impossible. There's no way they can build that wall that quickly. Nobody can work that quick. The impossible became possible. So what about us? Let's make some application then with this. And I'm just using this as a figure of speech, but what impossible walls need to be completed in your life? How many times is God telling us to do something, to change something, to make some kind of alteration to our life or the direction or anything of it, and we go, there's no way. There's no way. I can't. He won't. There's no way I can do that. That is impossible. How many times it says, it's impossible for me to be able to overcome this sin. I am so addicted to this behavior, there's no way I can give up that drink, that drug, that pornography. There's no way that I can repair this relationship, my marriage, or my family. It's impossible. There's no way that I can get my act together and actually be dedicated to God. I'm just too deep into whatever it is. What impossible walls need to be completed in your life? What impossible changes need to be? There's no way that I could be a leader in the church. I know that we're talking about that we need more elders right now, but there's no way I can do it. It's impossible. I can't. I know that we need people that step up and teach your friends about Jesus. I know we need people to volunteer. I know we need people to be generous, but I just can't do it. That's impossible for me. There's no way that that person is ever going to change and follow God. That's impossible. What impossible changes need to be made? What I see in the book of Nehemiah is that the impossible can become possible. I bet you all of you have stories about ways that God has done the impossible in your life. Maybe it was your conversion. Maybe you're like, man, there's no way I could ever be saved. If I walked into a church building, that building would fall down. There's no way I could ever overcome this. There's no way I could ever change. And look at you now. Look at you now. There's no way that I could change the direction of my family because I come from a family of dysfunction and drama. But look at your families now. There's no way that I could go on a positive path in my life. I'm always going to go down this road. But look at you now. And maybe you're looking at other people. You thought it was impossible. There's no way that person's ever going to believe. And now they believe. God's using them now. The impossible can become possible with God if we follow this example right here. Nehemiah ignored the opposition. There's always going to be people that tell you, you can't do that. You won't accomplish it. There's no way. Ignore them. Ignore them. There's going to be people that tell you that you can't change. There's going to be people that tell you that, no, it's no hope. Ignore them. Also, overcome fear. Sometimes letting God take over your life is scary because he's going to want you to do things that you don't want to do. You mean talk to somebody about Jesus? No, I can't do that. Possible becomes possible with God. Change this career path I'm on, or my family dynamic, or the people I hang around, or the hobbies I participate in. God's saying, go do this. You're like, I can't, God. He's saying, yes, you can. Overcome fear. And finally, number 3, give God the glory when it works out. Don't fall into the trap of going, wow, look at what I've done. Look at all the good things I've done. That's what the rich young ruler tried to do with Jesus. Jesus, look at all these commands I've followed and obeyed. And Jesus goes, all right, well, here's one more for you. Don't ever do that. Give God the glory. Don't go, hey, God, look at this beautiful wall I've built. No. Nehemiah and his contemporaries always gave God the glory when they accomplished that task. So when God does something amazing in your life, don't take credit for it. Have you ever thought about that? How many times are we taking credit for things God is doing? And we're puffing our chests and going, all right, I've done pretty good. Man, or maybe even as a church, we've done good. We've accomplished this. We're doing good works, and not God is doing good works through us. We need to make sure that we always give God the glory. So my motivation for you this week is this. Don't say I can't. When it comes to doing something that's spiritually good, producing the fruit of the Spirit, doing God's will, don't say I can't. Because there's going to be a voice in your head always that's going to be telling you that. Instead of saying I can't, say God can. Because the impossible becomes possible with God. The lesson is yours this morning, but I know anytime we have an audience like this, there's people that are going, I know, but I still can't. Tell that voice to shut up. Say, you know what? I'm going to make the change I need to make. I'm going to pray to God and ask him to forgive me, and I'm going to turn my life around, repent right now. If you're not a Christian and you're ready to confess Jesus as Lord and be baptized into him, quit saying, I can't, there's no way. Do it. Make those needed changes. Don't say I can't. Instead, say God can. We're going to sing a song here in a moment. I'll be up front for about a verse or so, but I'll also be in the back, and any member here will be glad to help you do the impossible with God. Because there's some amazing things that God has planned for you. You just haven't seen them yet. The impossible becomes possible with God. Let's stand and let's sing.